Monday, the 20th of April, the year of our Lord 2020. We're live from Capitol Hill at Fort Defiance. It's War Room Pandemic, live on the John Fredericks Radio Network, on Dish TV, channel 219, America's Voice, on Newsmax TV, throughout the world to 250 million English-speaking people from Latin America to Africa to Middle East to India. And, of course, later in the day, subtitled in Mandarin and blown through the firewall to the folks in China because of GTV and G News. Welcome back to the War Room. We're going to get Governor DeWine's interview. We'll get up as soon as possible. That was a fantastic interview from the governor of Ohio. He's doing a great job. Jack Maxey, Jason Miller, Raheem Kassam. Now honored to have the owner of the Dallas Mavericks, Mark Cuban, one of the most dynamic businessmen in America and throughout the world. Mark, thank you for joining us today on War Room Pandemic.
Thanks for having me, guys.
Listen, a whole generation of entrepreneurs look to you for kind of your thoughts. Kind of walk us through the Cuban plan. How would you, we had DeWine on earlier, but given we are where we are, how would you open up the country? What would be your plan to open up America right now?
Well, first, I don't know that I'd rush into it. I think there's a lot of unanswered questions. Do I want to get us open? Absolutely, positively. But we've got to make sure we dot all the I's and cross the T's. We can't rush. And I'll give you a couple of examples. Particularly small businesses are getting crushed right now. But let's just say you have a retail store. You sell clothing. How are you going to open up? What are the things that need to be in place? Do you allow people to try on clothes and just put them back? Do you allow people to touch them and feel the fabric and just go forward? What about your restroom? Do you have touch points? Do you have to introduce ambient voice? How do you deal with masks when they're disposed of? If you're a restaurant, someone sneezes and just leaves the mask on the table. Do you have to shut down the table? It's not just about social distancing. There's all kinds of things we have to think through first. And so those would be the first things I would do. I would make sure we have all those protocols in place. And then I'd understand the cost to small business, because we know that business is going to be reduced, that revenues are going to be down. Can they even afford to do these things? And if they can't, how do we have to support them? So step one is understand the problem. Step two is we've got to change how we distribute money to people right now. The PPP program was good in concept, bad in execution. I think we should have known that the banks didn't have enough manpower, and they're banks no matter how you look at it. And so going forward, I would have introduced an overdraft program that says for anything that's eligible for PPP, then you can overdraft your account, just write a check, business as usual, no friction, no applications to banks. At the end of the day, the Fed will cover those overdrafts, so the bank is made whole. That way they don't have to worry about being stuck in 2 years or whenever any loans would have to come due, anything that's not turned into a grant. And then each and every month or week, whatever it is, the banks can review for fraud, make sure people aren't buying cars with the money or whatever it may be, and move forward. That gives us a friction-free opportunity and understanding of how to open back up the economy.
Let me ask you about, go and jump in here, guys. We got Jason Miller, Raheem Kassam, Jack Maxey in the War Room today. Mark, just when you say about understand the problem, you're a guy that I think in particular people watch you on the Entrepreneur Show, Shark Tank, and have seen you operate at the NBA level. You're always thinking downrange, right? You're talking about, we're going to get to it later, about brands are going to be built at the end of this. They're going to last for decades. That your brand is going to be, people are going to remember how you handle your workers. You're always thinking downrange. Understanding the problem. Is that done at the federal level around the White House? You think it's better done at the state level with governors, with guys like you working with them? Or is it done with entrepreneurs? At what level do you start to, quote unquote, understand the problem and then promulgate these ideas out?
So first of all, it's got to be done at the federal level because it's public health. Because you don't want somebody, not understanding at the state level, municipality level, whatever it may be, the implications of, someone sneezing into a mask, thinking it's gross, leaving it on a table, and people, should they treat it as hazmat material? And if they have to treat it as hazmat material, how do they dispose of it? What are the costs involved? There are so many federal public health issues. You can't just leave it to local businesses to decide that. Now, once you promulgate the rules, and everybody has to play by the same rules, which is why I like it federally, as long as everybody's playing by the same rules, no state, city, one business has an advantage over another, then you let the entrepreneurs take over. Then you let American innovation take over. Just like, we all drive on the same side of the street, just like, there's certain things that we all adhere to. We all stop at stop signs. There's public safety issues that have to be addressed first. Once you get those out of the way, boom, American entrepreneurship takes over, and that's what makes this country different than every other, because then we innovate, and then we're a rocket ship, and that's when the economy really starts to move forward.
Mark, I want to ask you a question, a follow-up to what Governor DeWine told us in this last hour, that effectively these large crowd gatherings, sporting events, for him, Ohio State football, these are going to be the last things that come back. What is the latest as far as the way that you see realistically, whether it be the NBA finishing up this season or even as we head into the fall, what additional team sports and concerts and these cultural aspects, what's realistic for what's going to happen here?
I don't know. I mean, it's going to be a problem. We're not anticipating having a full stadium or even an arena with people at all for quite some time. I mean, the standard I use is would I let my kids go? And right now, the answer. Now, when we have therapies where the risk factor if you catch it is minimized or minimal or far less, then okay, then I'm willing to take the same risk that we face when it's flu season or cold season. But until then, there's just so much uncertainty. If I wouldn't let my kids do it, there's no way I'm going to let my employees do it, and then there's no reason to even try to do it.
And Mark, you're someone who's been praised by a lot of folks for having taken care of people during these shutdowns. I think that's something you definitely should be commended about. I want to ask you about this. I saw the news story over the weekend that NBA players will see their checks reduced by 25% starting on May 15th. And I want to tie that back into an interview that CJ McCollum, the two-guard for the Blazers, gave about a month or so back or a few weeks back, where he said upwards of a third of NBA players were living paycheck to paycheck. Did you see that story, and what were your thoughts on CJ's comments?
I mean, it's no different than the rest of the world. I mean, remember, most of the players in the NBA play for the minimum salary. They're not making $5, $10, $15, $20 million, even though the average salary is high. I mean, the vast majority are making $800,000 a year, which obviously is nothing to sneeze at. It's a lot of money. But those folks, maybe are not living the way they should, and they're going to have to make adjustments like everybody else. I mean, there are employees, and so I know with our guys, we're helping them as much as we can. I'm there to answer questions. I'm on group chats with our guys, trying to help wherever they need it. But it's going to be an adjustment, but I don't think anybody's going to feel sorry for them.
Look, you've said from the very beginning you were trying to take care of everybody at the arenas, everybody associated with the program, your program. How do you? That's out of you being not just an entrepreneur but also a good guy. The question gets to be, and people are asking, how, do you try to regulate that? And I know you're a guy that thinks big picture, but you're also a cutthroat American entrepreneur, right? So how do you transition if a guy's not a good guy? How do you get more organization into this effort? Do you have to mandate that they got to take care of it, or is it still up to the company and to the individual manager and owner?
No, it's up to the individual. I can't mandate how, and I don't think the federal government should mandate how others spend their money. It just is what it is. But there's a consequence for everything that you do. How your employees see you, how they speak about you is going to define, your company, your brand, you as an entrepreneur for potentially decades. And so it's not just, hey, how can I keep as much money as possible in my pocket? It's what's the big picture. And then it also goes to the issue of, do we deal with this from a top-down perspective or a bottom-up? And I'm a bigger fan of trickle-up economics and I'm not a fan of trickle-down economics.
Walk us through. You've used that phrase a couple of times. We've got to start focusing on trickle-up economics. What do you mean by that?
So effectively what the Fed is doing is they're they're subsidizing the financial marketplaces. They're saying, if you made a loan that may be not as strong as it once was because of the pandemic, we'll buy it. If there are mortgages that are being resold, then we'll buy those just to make sure that there's liquidity in the marketplace. We'll help banks that need help just to make sure that there's liquidity in the marketplace. The problem is, we'll do, that helps the stock market. It effectively acts as a foot or a bottom for financial instruments. The problem is most people don't own appreciable financial instruments. The vast majority of Americans don't. And so what the Fed is doing is turning into UBI for rich people like me. My stocks have taken a hit. But at the same time, there's an underpinning that the Fed has put there. But for somebody who's working hour to hour, paycheck to paycheck, or maybe now is, one of the 20 plus million people who don't have a job, they're stuck, right? And so I think we need to focus on how do we support them? Because if there are no consumers, it doesn't matter if businesses are going to open up. There's nobody to spend any money. And B, how do we, reconsider what the Fed does? Maybe we, instead of propping up the financial markets the way we have. And I'm not saying you don't do it at all. The Fed has to keep liquidity in there because things don't work otherwise. but you don't necessarily have to prop them up. That's a different element. Then maybe we look at, just back of the envelope math, trillions of dollars to subsidize businesses and financial instruments. Who knows how many trillions? If there's 50 million people that are now underemployed or unemployed, and $15 an hour is $30,000 a year, that's 1.5 trillion. And I'm not an economist, but one study or one model I'd love to see is which benefits the economy more: paying $1.5 trillion to people who we know will have to spend 99% of it, or giving that to banks and the markets and mortgage environments or mortgage brokers, whatever it may be, or mortgage buyers, which is going to help the economy more. I think there will be an argument to be made that the bottom up, giving that 1.5 trillion to the 50 million people, and not just giving it to them. I'm not saying UBI. I'm not saying, here's $30,000 a year, don't do anything. But there's so many jobs that we can put them to work in. Well, I think one of the future make good jobs is going to be tracking and testing. We're going to want to be able to deal not just with this pandemic, but future potential pandemics. And just like we had the Tennessee Valley Authority back in the 30s that created make work jobs, I think we're going to start having to create those and put those 50 million people to work at $30,000 a year and find jobs for them to do. It could be tracking and testing. It could be crosswalks. It could be reading to kids. It could be whatever it is. It could be, training them as healthcare workers. We're in an aging country, and there's going to be a shortage of healthcare workers for long-term care institutions. Put them to work there, train them and put them to work. There's so many things that we can do by putting people to work that benefit the economy from the bottom up. That I think that we need to strongly consider going forward.
We got a minute till we go to break, but I want to ask this: is this how you're saying the execution of PPP? You would just let it go to overdraft for the companies? Is that how you bridge this kind of capital markets back up the asset program to actually get it to companies? Use the banking system and just let them overdraft for a while?
That's just a timing perspective, because part of the issue is timing. Every single day these small companies don't get any money, then they're laying off, furloughing, firing employees, and that has a significant negative impact on the economy. So with overdraft protection, effectively, it's cheaper because you're not fronting the money up front. You're only paying as it's consumed. And it's less friction because you don't have to go through the whole application process.
And we got to get you real quick, Mark, your thoughts on The Last Dance last night on ESPN, the Jordan documentary.
But it was incredible. I literally was on the elliptical for almost 2 hours. Just, it was a great workout because it was just incredible.
We're going to take a short commercial break. Mark Cuban's going to stick with us. Want to go to hashtag if you want to hear your opinions. Get hashtag War Room Pandemic. It says a lot about where we are as a country. We're not watching NBA finals. We're not watching the kickoff to baseball. We're not watching spring college football. We're not watching the Masters and all that. We're watching, as great as The Last Dance is, it was a cultural event last night. Right, the night before was the concert. When the concert and Last Dance become major cultural events, that's when America's got to get very focused. We got to open this country back up again. Regardless of your political ideology, regardless of your political beliefs, we're a country that wants to get things done. The United States of America is about getting on with it. Okay, short commercial break. Mark Cuban's going to return. Raheem Kassam, Jack Maxey, Jason Miller. Hashtag War Room Pandemic. Later in the show, later today, we're going to have Alex Nazarian from Yahoo, the author of The Very Best People. He's going to give us a scorecard on how he thinks the cabinet's working in this pandemic crisis. We're going to return with Mark Cuban in the War Room in just a moment.
War Room Pandemic with Stephen K. Bannon.
The epidemic is a demon, and we cannot let this demon hide.
War Room Pandemic. Here's your host, Stephen K. Bannon.
Welcome back to War Room Pandemic. Remember, on the show, starting back in January, we focused not just on the pandemic, but the economic crisis it triggered, and on top of that, the solvency and liquidity crisis of the greatest financial crisis we've had in the history of this country. All of those combined make this an extraordinarily complicated problem to address, to tackle, and to solve. Honored to have Mark Cuban, owner of the Dallas Mavericks and one of the greatest entrepreneurs of his generation. Mark, just before, because on hashtag, we're building the community here from day one of not being partisan, although we're highly partisan, but trying to get all the information and news out so that we can get out of this mess. I just want to make sure, absent a vaccine, and we have no idea when a vaccine is going to come or not come. They haven't found a vaccine for SARS-1, for MERS, for HIV. But given where you sit today with therapeutics, where testing is, where antibody testing is, and your concept of how you have to think this through to open up, pre-vaccine, what do you think the process and how long does it take to get us back up to, 75, 80% of where we were? Or can we even get there in your mind?
I think America 2.0, I think America 1.0 is gone. That we're going through a reset as we speak, and we're getting ready for America 2.0. And that's where the entrepreneurial spirit needs to really pump in. We need to come up with new ways of doing business. We need to come up with new ways of manufacturing. We need to come up with new ways of evaluating problems and solving them. We can't just open up and presume that everything's going to go back the way it was. It won't. But therein lies the greatest opportunity in the history of this country. There will be new things invented. Will be great companies created. But we just can't lie to ourselves and say, you know what, this didn't happen. It did. And even though 90+% of the country hasn't truly been exposed to it, it's changed everything. Big companies aren't going to hire the same way. They're not going to retain their employees the same way. Small companies are going to have to adjust considerably. There's going to be a lot more buying done online, et cetera, et cetera. We have to recognize that America 2.0 is going to look vastly different than America 1.0.
As you look at America 2.0 now, over that chasm, I'm going to get to how we're going to bridge that financially and what our balance sheet is going to look like, because you're one of the few entrepreneurs that understands capital markets, real capital markets. That America 2.0, you've said, and one of the fascinating things we get in studying you is that they're going to be companies, not only is your brand going to be associated with how you handled and comported yourself with your employees in this that will last for decades, they're going to be companies that are going to be built during this and after this time that are going to last for a generation. As you see it today, where are those verticals? Where do you see those companies being built?
Artificial intelligence, robotics, personalized medicine will be the big three. I mean, look, I'm a big believer in American exceptionalism. I want America to dominate all facets of business life globally. I want to treat Americans as family, but be a good global citizen and just kick everybody's ass. And in order to do that and bring back those jobs that we've lost, we're going to have to be the best at all advanced technologies. We are not the best at robotics right now. Germany, Japan, and to a lesser extent, China is better at us in manufacturing and developing software for them. But in order for us to reclaim manufacturing from East Asia and other places around the world, our opportunity to do that is going to come from being the best at robotics. In order to do that, when we talk about infrastructure and rebuilding this country, just as infrastructure, built dams and built roads that connected cities and built airports that connected the world, we need to come up with, and those were new ways to approach commerce. We need to come up with new ways to approach commerce as we go forward. I think robotics, we need to invest, when we talk about investing in infrastructure in America 2.0, robotics has to be at the top of the list, because that's the one way we're going to bring back not just some manufacturing, but almost all manufacturing. And if we don't do it, we'll lose much of our manufacturing that we still have left. Now, the question becomes, what about jobs? And I think the concept of assembly line jobs, that was America 1.0, manufacturing 1.0. But by using robotics, the aggregate employment, even for people who are less skilled, will be dramatically bigger. So that's one thing. Robotics has got to be an extreme focus and point of investment by the federal government. Artificial intelligence. I mean, China and Russia have made, haven't hidden the fact that they believe whoever dominates AI will dominate the global economy. And that's exactly what we need to do. And we were already on that path, not so much investing federally, but our biggest companies recognized that AI is what's going to make them dominate globally. And so we need to do more of that. We need to invest more of it, again, with our biggest companies and let them be entrepreneurial, but also for federally, again, investing there. That's our moonshot. And then, third on the list is personalized medicine. We're learning with COVID that it reacts to everybody differently. It's not one size fits all. It may be like radiation. The more you get, the worse it impacts you. The less you're exposed to it, the less it impacts you. we're learning all these things, but effectively our bodies are one big math equation. And when a virus or anything else external is introduced, that impacts that math equation and all the variables. And every day we're doing science and research to try to figure out, how our bodies work. That's personalized medicine and coming up with therapies that are individualized. You're starting to hear things about cancer therapies. We'll hear more about therapy for COVID that's individualized. Those are the types of things that by investing in personalized and precision medicine like that, that'll help protect us in the future. And again, give us a leg up globally. We want to be the dominant player in all three of those categories.
A lot of people in our audience may not realize this, but your really rise of prominence as an entrepreneur was because you were a guy, I think out in Manhattan Beach, California, the one to listen to Hoosier basketball, right? You're a Hoosier. You understand that Midwest values. What is because today we got some people maybe protesting, some of our great audience, the deplorables. What would you say about the Hoosier spirit? How can the Hoosier spirit and what Hoosiers stand for, that kind of great Midwest values, does that translate over to America 2.0? Does that drive America 2.0?
Yeah, absolutely. Look, there's going to be somebody sitting in Bloomington, Indiana that's bored because they're not taking classes right now. There's going to be somebody in Carmel, Indiana, that's up in the region in Indiana that just says, you know what, this is the idea I have. I'm quarantined, I'm at home. This is my time to go to work on it. And it doesn't necessarily have to be the biggest technological innovation. It could be something that simplifies how we go back to work. It could be hand washing stations for public parks. It could be a disposal business for mass, for small businesses. It can be any number of 1,000 different things that I haven't thought of. And you know what? On Shark Tank, as an example, the things that get me the most excited are businesses that walk in, present their idea, and I think to myself, dang, why didn't I think of that? I'm really sad that I didn't think of that. There's going to be so many of those that come through because, look, guys like me that have been doing this for a long time and have started many businesses, we don't have any big advantage. This is a great equalizer. It's not even about capital. It's about brain power. It's about energy. It's about, piss and vinegar to go out there and say, you know what, screw it, I'm going for it. And like I tell everybody, the one question you need to ask yourself when you're sitting on the fence and thinking, maybe this can be big, maybe this can be great. The one question to ask is, why not me? That's what makes us different than every country in the world, because it's not just that Hoosier spirit, that's the American spirit. That's why I do Shark Tank, because it sends the message every single show that the American dream is alive and well. And, a little bit of piss and vinegar, a little bit of insight, a little bit of effort. And you know what? It might be you.
All right. I want to stay right there with Shark Tank. And I've seen your previous answers, the one that got away. If you knew then what you know now, and of course, no one could have predicted COVID-19 Doorbot. You know I was going to go there with the big one. Would you have made the play for Doorbot, or would you still give you that same non-answer about the infrastructure and the ramp-up cost?
Yeah, no, I would have still said no. Doorbot obviously turned into Ring. The Ring turned real big. But I have this rule, Jason, that one of my rules is if you're having to spend tens or hundreds of millions of dollars in marketing to make 10% of that or 20% of that in sales, in essence, buying customers, maybe I'll miss some of those types of companies, but they're just not my thing. It just goes against everything that I have. I'm a startup guy. I mean, my first company, I got fired from my job, and I was living 6 guys in a 3-bedroom apartment, and I had to beg a customer to front me $500. When we started the whole streaming AudioNet, I started with $3,000 in a Packard Bell computer in a bedroom, right? And that built the whole streaming industry. All my best businesses, even my failures, came from sweat equity. And to me, if you have to spend, hundreds of millions of dollars, raise hundreds of millions of dollars, that's just not my style. So I get your point, but I'd still say no.
Okay, one more sports question. I mean, you are
got
the
about
owner
a minute
of the
left.
Yeah,
Go,
be
yeah.
quick. Okay, if you come back and have some sort of the NBA playoffs truncated version, only 4 games separate you and the Clips, but you'd get the Clips in the first round. I know that the one game where that both Kawhi and PG, they ran you pretty good. When PG was out, you kept him close. Luka's the man. I'm a huge Luka fan. How do you guys get past the Clips in a round 1?
We score more points, win more games.
I love it.
Hold some point. What was your question about the time? The what's his bigger
I
disappointment?
was going to heckle you. What was the bigger disappointment? Was it either allowing the Ring to get away or blowing the 2-0 lead in the 2006 finals? But you already answered the Ring question, so and you did get the Ring in 2011, so I can't really heckle you on that.
Mark, thank you so much.
2006 was
Thanks you so much for joining us today on War Room Pandemic. Great advice and great pump up spirit for the American people. Really appreciate it, sir.
Thanks for having me on, guys. Really enjoyed it.
Mark Cuban. You see, Mark is one of these entrepreneurial populists. That was this is part of hopefully the Trump movement, but not just Trump movement, the Bernie movement, all the Bernie guys. Remember, we talked about AOC. We just don't believe in government intervention, although he's talking about, you have to do this bridge. We'll talk about more when we get back, but just the entrepreneurial spirit. It's what's going to get us through here. It's what's going to get us to the other side. # War Room Pandemic. Let us know what you think. What do you think about that segment? What do you think about Mark Cuban? What do you think about his ideas? Some big ideas. We're going to deconstruct those ideas when we return with Raheem, Jason, and Jack, Steve Bannon here. War Room Pandemic. We'll be back on Capitol Hill in just a moment.
War Room Pandemic with Stephen K. Bannon.
The epidemic is a demon, and we cannot let this demon.
War Room Pandemic. Here's your host, Stephen K. Bannon.
On # War Room Pandemic, I want all of our community to determine, are you America 1.0 or America 2.0? Do you agree with Mark Cuban or do you not agree with Mark Cuban? Throw down. Let's hear it. Okay? Mark Cuban's a smart guy, a great guy, but he's not end all and be all. He'd be the first to tell you. I mean, he's kind of a populist and I realize he's a big government populist. Some of us are, but he's from Indiana. Remember, he got his start. It was Indiana basketball down in Manhattan Beach. He wanted to figure out how he could listen to Indiana basketball, and that's where he came up with the whole idea of really his first company, the first company that got traction. He said $3,000 in capital. Had to get an advance from a customer for $500. So it's doable. If you're out there right now and the CCPs put you out of business, just remember, it's grit, determination, indefatigable spirit. That's what Mark Cuban brings to the table, because the guy, I've known him for now 20 years. When Jeff Quatnitz and I had Jeff Quatnitz was the senior partner at the firm. We had a big management company out in Beverly Hills, and Cuban was not a client, but he was one of the big players rising at the time, particularly on the internet. And just a fabulous guy. Hasn't changed a bit. The same guy. And he's a fire breather, and he gets stuff done. Look what he's done for basketball. I think he's been the most influential owner in the NBA.
Easily. I was going to ask what the total amount he's been fined over his career. It's something that's like well over $1 million because he always runs on the court and yells at the refs. So you kind of got to respect that. Here's the reason why we have someone like a Mark Cuban on, is because we want people to think bigger. We want people to think outside of their normal sphere, outside of the normal publications they read, the people that they argue
Absolutely.
with. And we want them to realize, for people you might not politically stack up with, we want you to think, if you're going to put together an argument and go and have that argument, we're not going to diners anymore, but you're arguing with your relatives, you're arguing with your friends, you're like, how do we go and bring the economy back? Yeah. What's the future going to look like? You got to argue with people who think differently than you do.
When Churchill put the National Coalition government together in the face of the Nazi conqueror of Europe, he put labor-rights sitting next to him. It's about coming together as a nation, not retreating into your ideological
The signal
corners.
in the noise. You got to broom the noise and focus on the signal, and that's what. And you don't have to agree with Mark Cuban, but you got to start understanding how guys like Mark Cuban think.
Well, the other reason why having him on shows just what a great country America is, right? We may all disagree, but guess what? We get to have the conversation. In China, they don't get the conversation.
By the way, Cuban was an early Trump supporter. He liked the whole media stuff. He knew Trump for years, right? Of course, they had a falling out for a host of reasons. We didn't get a chance to get to that. Maybe we'll get him back on and talk about that. But it was at the convention. He flipped for Hillary Clinton in July of 2016. Right, in that summer, he flipped to become a Hillary supporter and has not been a fan of President Trump since then.
And if we talk about the buried lead in that interview, there's a 0.0 chance that the Mavs are going to get by the Clips in a round one if they do end up playing. So that's
By the way, there are plenty of things, and I'm watching the audience reaction here on # War and Pandemic to the interview, and lots of people like it. Lots of people really appreciate the distinction here. And
well, he has
some of the
respect for.
things that-
Remember, he has respect for you guys for coming on, right? There's a lot of people.
Exactly.
You mentioned War and Pandemic. You mentioned Raheem Kassam, Jason Miller, and maybe Steve Bannon, and they freeze up. Now, Jack Maxey, they all want to come for Jack, but no, they mentioned the three amigos here, and they. I don't know if I'm going that.
I don't want to come on half the time. Okay.
Well, no, we noticed at 9:59 in the morning. We've noticed when you wander in here.
But some people obviously concerned about his politics and so on and so forth. One of the things I thought was interesting was what he said about tracing and making sure that effectively, government is tracking those who are fit enough to work. That's where a lot of people aren't approaching this ideologically. They're genuinely worried about some civil liberties argument.
I'm worried about artificial intelligence.
To that.
There's going to be a film that comes out. It hasn't been announced. They asked me to be a part of it because I'm a populist. It's going to come out. I think it's a 12-hour HBO thing. That'll come out, and if I get more information, I'll be able to tell you about it. But it's about art. It was made a year ago, started 2 years ago. Top filmmaker, top people in the country. I don't know why I got invited, but they like my shtick, and it was about artificial intelligence and things like that. I'm not a big, artificial intelligence is you got to really watch this. It's quite dangerous. So what he's talking about, but hey. You can see where the future's driving us, right? And look, I've been a big name in trying to control some of the tech companies, particularly your data sovereignty is very important. We're going to have to work all these issues out, but you're going to have to work with, look, bottom line is Cuban's a player, and he's going to be a bigger player over time. You can tell that about how he's jumped into this dialogue nationally on CNBC and the business networks, et cetera. We lost the link to Alex Nazarian. So let's go. Okay, until we get Alex back. We've got Alex of Yahoo who's going to join us, terrific reporter. And by the way, another guy you're not going to agree with 1,000% of the time. You probably wouldn't like to be like the book, but you should read the book, The Very Best People. You should read all these books. You should get all your different opinions. Remember, the power of the deplorables is you've got the common sense and kind of understanding of where the country is, but you got to be able to take different approaches. You can't just get in a cubbyhole. I've never been a part of that. When I was at Breitbart, when I had the Breitbart radio show, we get all opinions in there, and you drive the conversation forward. Remember, President Trump is an entrepreneur. President Trump, hey, he's making it up as he goes along half the time anyway, right? That's the power of Trump, the power of in the Trump time. It's supposed to be done yesterday, not 2 weeks from now. I don't need a big committee to do this. What we got on international, we also have some updates on our are you finished with our German friends? Because I love that German story.
Yeah, no, we'll move from Germany now just across Europe very quickly while we reconnect with our next guest. Denmark is reopening some things now, hair salons, dentists, small businesses. The French saying life will not go back to normal. That's a quote on May the 11th, their date to lift the coronavirus lockdown in France. The Spanish death rate falling to 399, so we're now way down from where they were a couple of weeks ago. But the Prime Minister of Spain, Pedro Sanchez, saying he's going to ask Parliament to extend their lockdown to May the 11th to come into line with the French. In Poland, Norway, the Czech Republic, and Albania, they are beginning easing. Things like bookshops, florists, fashion stores, bicycle stores, car sellers, and shops under 800 square meters large. I don't know what that is in feet.
But there's a report out last night. I read that IMF, I think, put a report out 25% of the jobs in the EU are going away. It's just not they're going to have. They've had such a dramatic demand destruction that 25%. These right now, Germany's starting a stimulus program for Germany. They haven't had a European Union consensus. How do these individual countries, and by the way, if you aggregate up, Jack, we ought to do that tomorrow, talked about the EU numbers versus US numbers. If you aggregate up the EU versus the United States, the numbers are horrific, right? And they were supposed to be so advanced in their medical systems, some of these socialist systems, their safety net for people. They've had kind of a horrific run, right? And so what happens if 25% of the jobs in Europe go away, not just a recession type, hey, they're going to come back, but they're literally saying, hey, these may not return. What happens to Europe?
Well, that is the reason I think a lot of these people are saying things aren't going to go back to normal from May the 11th. Forget about it, right? And the reason you see Macron last week, the French president, in the Financial Times, talking about where the EU goes from here. Angela Merkel saying that over this weekend as well, saying, well, look, with our budget, with the current EU budget, especially with the Brits leaving, we really can't do anything that we want to do on a continental-wide scale that deals with this kind of thing. So everyone's now looking for answers. Nobody really providing them, but plenty asking the questions.
We've got Alex Nazarian on now from Yahoo. He's not Skyped in. He's on the phone. Oh, he's on. Okay, fine. Alex, thank you for joining us here on War and Pandemic. Alex, I don't think we got it yet, Vish. Good try. That's okay. Had a little technical problem.
The
but they
cube
have
got
it.
hot; it melted the wires. Okay.
Ratings boom.
I want to just jump in real quick as well while I have the time to talk about this latest polling coming out of the United Kingdom. Now, you know that between myself and Nigel Farage, we had really been the only ones pushing this, what we call the No Way Huawei campaign from last year, talking about how Huawei was overtaking the British telecommunications infrastructure, the 5G networks, all of this stuff. On the back of the coronavirus, the Henry Jackson Society, we had Dr. Alan Mendoza on last week.
It's fabulous.
They've done a poll, and the poll came out in the Sunday Times yesterday, and they actually sent me all of the crosstabs. I want to go through them real quick for you. 74% of Britons blame the Chinese government for what's happened here.
74%.
74%.
Like that.
71% say sue the Chinese government if it can be proved that they breached international law in this cover-up of the whole thing. 83% say the UK should demand an international inquiry into the matter. I guess that's pooling resources from all over the world to get to the bottom
It's
of
my
it.
Nuremberg trial.
And the plurality, 40%, are now against Huawei, while only 27% support Huawei in Britain's 5G
But it's still
infrastructure.
they still don't totally translate what the Chinese Communist Party did to them in the virus to we can't have the Chinese Communist Party in our telecom system. Is that because that's still not a direct link?
Yeah, they don't believe. Britons aren't aware necessarily en masse that there is a direct link between all of these oligarchic type companies in China and the Chinese Communist Party. There's a lack of public information there. Some of that's been filled over the last couple of weeks. You're getting more reporting, which is why the numbers are shifting. But in addition to that, also remember most people are saying, or rather, the differential between the 40% and the 27% here. The rest are saying we just don't know yet. So they're waiting for more evidence to come
I want to
out.
come back to the Wall Street Journal NBC poll about people's what they think about the leaders in our country. But Jack, you dropped a bombshell on me about Ecuador and the Chinese Communist Party, about how, listen, they're running the tables in the Gulf. This whole MBS going and Putin going gangster on us is because of what's happening in Ecuador.
And this is happening all over the world. The Chinese are doing this behind the scenes. Ecuador borrowed about $7 billion from the Chinese over the last decade to build some hydroelectric projects. And of course, just like with all the debt slavery deals that these Belt and Road programs have done around the world, the money is just lent knowing that they'll never be able to pay it back, and that the Chinese Communist Party can seize assets then that are given as collateral.
You're telling me that they're down in Ecuador, they're going to buy 50% of the rainforest?
They're going to buy about 40% of the rainforest, the Chinese National Oil Company. And what's very interesting here, this is the rainforest there comes together in the Amazon jungle. And Peru has already declared their border with Ecuador to be a disaster area because of so much oil that has seeped out from poor practices. And also, what is very interesting, all at the same time, we're looking at this, particularly people who might be a little bit more environmentally sound. This is the Brazilian rainforest basin, right? They're going to sell a third of Ecuador for oil exploration. And just last week, they found out that a doctor had infected the local population down there in the jungles with COVID-19. So we're actually looking at a potential humanitarian disaster down there because these Indians have very low immunity for many of these diseases, and now we're going to let them go.
On Saturday's show, we had the voice of the Chinese people about Wuhan. People had relatives there talking about Wuhan, and we started the show. You had the article from the South China Morning Post where the former head, the Rex Tillerson of China, the former head of Sinopec, I think it is, the Chinese National Oil Company, was in the South China Morning Post saying, hey, people in China, the Americans are coming for us. This is going to lead to a war. So these guys at the senior level of the oil industry, they understand exactly what they're doing.
Oh, and they understand that their supply of oil coming out of the Middle East is not secure, so they're trying to get other sources around the world as fast as they can.
If you're America 1.0 and you're sitting there right now sucking your thumb because Mark Cuban said, your day is over, you're American 1.0, you toughen up. Okay, remember, as I remember, it's a pretty tough place, right? I'm a proud member of it. Look to Hong Kong right now. If you're America 1.0, in Hong Kong, what happened is they arrested 15 freedom fighters overnight. The Chinese Communist Party, people like Jimmy Lai. We've had his partner, Mark Simon, on this show many times. The colleague of Cardinal Zen, who I met with in New York when he was over here about a month or two ago. Yeah, they've arrested the gentleman, the 81-year-old guy that actually wrote the deal, wrote the Constitution. that wrote the Constitution. 81 years old. He was the guy with Chris Patton and these guys actually wrote the deal that the world agreed to that they've reneged on. They sent a message to the West. They sent a message particularly to the United Kingdom and the United States of America. You're too gutless to stand up to us. So here's what we're going to do. We're going to put the top 15 freedom fighters, we're going to put them in prison. Yeah. Okay? And what are you guys going to do about it? You know what you're going to do about it? You're just going to sit there and take it. Stephen K. Bannon in the War Room pandemic team. We're going to take a short commercial break. Hopefully return with Alex Nazarian from Yahoo in a moment.
War Room Pandemic with Stephen K. Bannon.
The epidemic is a demon, and we cannot let this demon hide.
War Room Pandemic. Here's your host, Stephen K. Bannon.
Welcome back to the War Room. On a day we had Governor Mike DeWine and we had Mark Cuban. What a better way to finish it with Alex Nazarian of Yahoo, one of the top. Don't always agree with their point of view over at Yahoo, but a tough reporter and a guy that goes out and gets a story. He's tracked around with us throughout the country. Alex, welcome here. Sorry we couldn't Skype you in, but welcome here to the War Room.
Hey, thanks, Steve. Thanks, Jason. Naheem. I wish we were doing this at the embassy, but this is the new normal.
Alex, we'll jump right into it here. So, look, you wrote the book, The Best People. I want to get your take on the president's cabinet and the coronavirus task force so far. Who has overachieved? Who has underachieved? Who are you surprised has been out there as much? Who are you surprised that hasn't been out there? As someone who's really done the homework and dove into the performers and non-performers in the cabinet, what are your thoughts so far that we have this whole new elevation?
Yeah, well, I'll say that a lot of members of the media, I think a lot of people sort of on the center left have been pleasantly surprised by Mike Pence, and he's kind of been the adult in the room, and he has every briefing, he begins by thanking the president, but then in pretty subtle ways, especially early on, he would contradict Trump, or he would say nice things about, for example, Jay Inslee when Trump was denouncing him as a snake or whatever. So I think Pence has been a really stable presence in that briefing room, and that has, and for a lot of people in my line of work who were skeptical of him, that's been really refreshing. Look, Azar was never a natural fit with Trump. Trump has never really had someone at Health and Human Services whom he has liked. Tom Price wasn't able to do the Obamacare repeal, and then his use of the private jets got him in trouble. Azar is, he's a lawyer, he's a pharmaceutical executive, so he has not been quite as out front as maybe he would be in another administration. And then, I've been a little surprised. I've been sort of curious about Jared Kushner's role in this. He's been at one briefing, maybe two, but I think just one. And otherwise, I don't entirely understand what his role on the team is, since his job seems to overlap with that of Peter Navarro to a large extent, and Peter seems to, know what he's talking about. I don't know what Jared's Jared's expertise is on supply lines, Defense Production Act. So I've been curious about his role.
Alex, let me ask you: the left, the mainstream media has fallen in love with Dr. Fauci and Ambassador Dr. Colonel Birx. And we've been attacking, I shouldn't say attacking, giving useful, we think, constructive observations that we want them to be more analytical. We want their own models. We want to, every day, and we've seen Dr. Birx has now gone through that. She's not on stage now. She's got a scarf and she's got a set of slides in back of her that are mathematical. Dr. Birx, you're learning, and it's working, okay? But why has guys like you, why have you not gone into, and I realize people on the right are saying, hey, they're part of the deep state. They gave money to Bill Gates. They're trying to get everybody vaccinated and put a chip in your head. But why has the mainstream media kind of given them a pass on the fact that Fauci and Birx and others, Azar, have not been up there with the kind of metrics, analytics, the deep dive that we know guys like you want to do?
That's a really good question, Steve. I think part of it is because every one of those briefings,
That was
And
a
the fact
Freudian.
I
That was a
have
Fre- that was a Freudian. That was a Freudian
Yeah,
slip. We
yeah.
just made news.
It was. Each one of those briefings is like a boxing match with people in the ring, and it never quite. I haven't been going in because I just because of health. I just don't want to. I just haven't been going in, so I've been watching on TV. But you want certain questions to be asked, and then suddenly Trump is fighting with, a reporter, and it takes up all the energy, right? I do believe those briefings should be about the rigorous examination of the numbers. I think that's the only thing that's really important right now, is to understand how this virus is spreading, how we can stop it, also where it came from, like you guys have been really good on. But just because there's so much happening in each briefing, and I spoke to Governor Hogan of Maryland the other day, and he said, maybe we should do two briefings. Trump gets his briefing, then the scientists get their briefing. What do you guys think of that?
We've said that from day one. We said that actually, and it shouldn't be the White House correspondents for the first briefing. We want the business and tech guys in there hammering Fauci, hammering Birx. Look, we think very highly of both of them, but we would like to see the analytics and metrics in a pen and pad or whatever. And I think the nation would actually like to sit in. And then President Trump comes out, gives his overview, a few power moves, and then I think gets into it with the media, right? People love that. You guys are asking tough, snarky questions, and he's giving it back as good as he's getting it.
Well, I will ask Alex as well, just very quickly, is you can imagine why, and hopefully you can explain a little bit of this to us. You can understand why the energy gets sucked out of the room when I'm just looking at some of the Yahoo News headlines on the last couple of days. Without supplying evidence, Trump says China has more coronavirus deaths than the U.S., and then Senator Tom Cotton spreads debunked theory about the coronavirus. This was when we were talking about it not being in the wet market. You can understand, surely, can't you?
I like Yahoo. Don't tell me Yahoo's got those headlines up there. Alex, you're killing me.
No, but hey, in one of those stories, Raheem, and I have written, and I that's just a headline. I've written that there's no way China's numbers can be accurate. There is no way. But I do believe the president should show us the numbers he's looking at, just like Dr. Birx and Dr. Fauci should show us their numbers. Everybody, show us your numbers. And that's,
Alex, I know you're fair.
Everyone else we verify, right?
Alex, I know you're fair. I would just take that headline back to the editor.
But Alex, what we need to do is get you into the. You got to get a mask, get an N95. We got a couple extra here, and you got to get into the press briefing. We need Alex Nazarian there asking some tough questions.
I appreciate that. Let me ask you. Let me just go.
I tell you, we got 30 seconds. Hit us quick.
Yeah, look, they're political and informational, and that's very difficult to do, right? Because you're trying to give people information, but you're also trying to move it politically in the direction you want. That's really tough.
Yeah, we would refer to that as a rally. So, Alex and Nazarian, Alex, what's your Twitter? What's your Twitter handle? How do people get access to you?
Alex Nazarian. Thank you for having me, guys.
Absolutely. And again, the book is The Best People. That's Yahoo News' Alex Nazarian. Very fair reporter. Tough, but we say he's fair.
If you're a deplorable, your head will blow up while you read it. Alex Nazarian, good guy, tough guy. Okay, we're going to be back tomorrow morning, 10 a.m., with another Murderers Row of guest commentary and analysis. See you then.